Without the help of a modern crane, the timber framers must trust the strength of two slender poles and the rigging of their ropes in order to raise the 1-ton throwing arm.
One accident, one slip, one failure hidden in the heart of this timber, and we're out of business. Simple as that. Washer's clear.
It's looking real good right now. It's going right on in there like we planned.
We are there. We are in place.
With the throwing arm in position, Wayne needs to attach weights that will power the machine. He chooses lead because he believes lead was used for the counterweight of Warwolf, the mysterious and terrifying siege engine that clinched the assault on Stirling Castle. There is good historical evidence for this. In a letter Edward wrote just before the siege, he demanded that lead be removed from all the churches.
One of the things that they needed for the siege of Stirling was heavy weights for the counterweights on the engines, and they sent orders out to strip all of the church roofs in the entire surrounding area. So all of this lead sheets would have been brought to the siege and then melted down in order to form the counterweights.
Here we go.
Wayne's calculations tell him that in order for his machine to throw a 250-pound ball, he'll need about 6.5 tons of lead counterweight. It takes a week to melt down the scrap and form it into a collar that can be bolted onto the arm.
Wayne's come up with a really neat solution for a lead counterweight made of various pieces, bolted together. But it is expensive, lead is difficult to get hold of, it's complex to make this. There is a much easier solution, which is to use a large box as a counterweight, something like this, which you could fill with earth, with stones, with anything you'd got. Fill it up, you could put as much or as little in as you wanted, and that would affect the range of the machine. And you'd simply then have to put this box on the machine, swiveling, roughly like that.
A survey of medieval illustrations suggests that swinging counterweights were the more popular design. A man who has been working with them longer than anyone else is traditional French carpenter Renaud Buffet. Renaud is convinced that Edward's great siege engine Warwolf had a swinging counterweight box. The simple design of the box makes it not only cheaper, but easier to build than one with a lead counterweight.
Here we go.
And Renaud has found graphic accounts of the destructive power of some really big siege machines.
I found an account medieval.
An account, yes,
Yeah,
a medieval account.
And they pay 300 bullets in 3 days. Then they shoot 300 bullets on the same place, on the same wall. After 3 days, the wall was destroyed.
So you think the real purpose of something like this is simply to attack a castle from a distance and bring the wall down?
Yes.
Yeah.
500 years before Newton's apple, medieval engineers had figured that trebuchets with a swinging counterweight are the most efficient at using the force of gravity. Like adding wheels to a fixed counterweight trebuchet, the hinge allows the swinging counterweight to descend further in a straighter line, capturing more energy for the throw. 15 years ago, Renaud came across the notebook of the 13th century French architect Villard de Honnecourt. In it, he found the plan for the base of a trebuchet and a description of the swinging counterweight box. Unfortunately, the page showing the rest of the trebuchet was missing. But with his knowledge of medieval carpentry and his experience of building over 30 small trebuchets, Renault realized that if the design were ever built, it would be monstrous, the height of a 5-story building. Ever since this discovery, Renault has wanted to construct the full-size trebuchet. Finally, he will get the chance at Castle Urquhart in Scotland. At the start of a medieval siege, a trebuchet engineer would typically seek out as big a throwing arm as possible. Renault inspects a good-sized oak log that he hopes will be suitable. Using the same geometric principles employed by the medieval engineers who built castles, cathedrals, and siege machines, Renault starts designing his trebuchet. The key decision is where on the throwing arm to position the main pivot point or fulcrum. Medieval engineers worked this out by observation. In this largely illiterate society, carpenters used animal figures like these as an aid to remember geometric formulas. Now that Renault knows where to put the main axle, he can design the trestle, base, and capstans to raise the counterweight box, because they are all sized in proportion to the throwing arm. But just as he begins building the trebuchet, Renault is called back to France. In his absence, work progresses on the base. Work also begins on drilling out the main axle hole in the throwing arm. Unfortunately, there is some confusion about the size of the opening, and a nasty surprise awaits Renault's return.
Hi, good morning.
Renault's been away for a couple of days, and while he was away, we cut the axle hole. It's quite apparent that a lot of meat has gone from the timber, and we're left with quite thin sections on either side.
I think the beam, the throwing arms can break here, in this part.
Renault's concern is that we've gone too much to this extreme where we've taken out too much wood of the throwing arm and made the axle too strong. His concern, of course, is in our first throw that it's going to do something like that.
Renault is left with no alternative but to hope that a couple of planks will be strong enough to splint the weakened throwing arm. Finally, work starts on raising the great trestles. With each passing day, the situation at Castle Urquhart more and more resembles a siege of old. With 2 trebuchets to finish, there is a nagging feeling that Renault's machine may not get done before the timber framers must return home. Over at Wayne's trebuchet, work on attaching the lead weights is finally finished. All that remains is to cock the arm. Even with the help of pulleys, this requires 40 people. With a 13,000-pound counterweight, it's a much bigger job than anyone imagined. And it will have to be repeated for each fling.
Okay. All right, let's get in here.
The trigger mechanism is not strong enough and buckles alarmingly as it takes the full weight of the throwing arm.
It's bending as we're releasing the arm, and we're wondering whether it can hold the weight right now.
To avoid an accidental firing, they reinforce it with a length of chain.
We've got lots of engineers on this, and maybe they've got it right, but I think it's quite difficult to get it right.
It's chaos. The sun is going down. I don't have a clue whether or not we'll finish even one of these machines on time.
Well, we're under the gun now. It's kind of touch and go whether we're going to get this thing put together and actually slinging both machines, but if I know this crew, come hell or high water, we're going to make this thing fling. There goes your light.
The next morning, a 250-pound sandstone ball is quickly positioned in the sling for the first throw.
I'd rather have it below the sling.
It's got about a 50% chance of going in the right direction. It could go in the lake there by mistake, because these adjustments are not well known to us.
You ready? This is it. 1, 2, 3, fire in the hole!
Even with 12 timber framers pulling, the firing pin won't budge.
It's quite normal that. I mean, triggers are very stiff. We found that at home. It takes a lot of effort, which is as well in some ways.
Despite Hugh's predictions that a trebuchet on wheels would shake itself to pieces, the reverse is true. Wheels dampen the recoil. Everything appears to be working as Wayne predicted, except the range. The ball only traveled about 170 yards, falling short of the wall.
What are we? 30 yards short and about 5 feet low. I thought it was flat, which means we got to, I think, shorten the sling so it releases sooner and goes higher, which should get us to the wall.
Just like his medieval counterpart, Wayne uses a process of trial and error to alter the trebuchet's range by adjusting the length of the sling. With the first throw, a long sling resulted in a late release and a low trajectory. By shortening the sling, Wayne believes the ball will be released earlier, resulting in a higher path. Wayne's adjustments have the desired effect. The second throw has perfect range, just missing the target to the right by 2 feet.
I think we took the king's ear off.
Good
job, Wayne.
And so it needs a slight adjustment, and then we're going to be a direct hit.
Tomorrow is another day.
What will be the last day for Wayne and his team dawns, with the wall still intact, but clearly under threat. Meanwhile, Renault's trebuchet is still not finished. This morning, they rush to complete the counterweight box that is hinged to the throwing arm.
We've got the one treb built. The other one is about 99% of the way there. We flung 2 stones last